So hello again, those who were in one of my previous sessions and those who haven't. My name is Snir. I'm the Senior Product Manager for MyHeritage DNA. And this lecture will be mostly about theory of family relativity, a relative new feature that we released earlier this year. But we'll split this talk into two. I will start by doing some product overview, because I haven't done it today yet. And it's important to emphasize the benefits that the theory of family relativity provides after understanding what else is available on MyHeritage to work with your DNA matches. And then we'll dive into the theory, of course, and if there are some questions, I'll be happy to answer them towards the end. All right. So I asked that in the previous session, and almost everyone raised their hand, so I assume most of you, if not all of you, have DNA on MyHeritage, your DNA results on MyHeritage. So let's do a brief overview on what you can do on MyHeritage today, how you can work with your DNA results. I will be using my own results today and my cousins. So this is your list of DNA matches if you have taken a test with us, and let's zoom in into a DNA match and see what we can tell you about it. Like, what's the starting point, right? You got your results, you log in, you look at your list, and you want to understand how these people are related to you. So let's take, for example, my first match, one of my closest matches. So this is one Mr. Homer Simpson, and on the top left side, you can see that he's in his 40s for about 30 years or so now, and that he's from the US, and you get an option to contact Homer. If Homer's DNA is managed by someone else, we will also mention who activated or uploaded the data for him, and you'll get the option to contact them as well. We show you the estimated relationship to you. So in this case, Homer can be my first cousin twice removed to my third cousin. And I'd like to draw your attention, please, to the little question mark icon that's next to that line. Many users, many folks miss that. And if you'll click on that, it will open up a chart that shows you what exactly a first cousin twice removed to a third cousin once removed is. So this chart looks different on every DNA match that you click on. It will adjust to show the relevant relationships for that DNA match. So it's really, it makes much sense to use that and makes life much easier, at least for me, when I'm getting lost in the terminology. On the top right side corner, the one that's not marked at the moment, you can see the DNA match quality. I've spoken about it in my previous session. So that's the amount of shared DNA which actually determined your relationship to him, the number of segments, and the largest segment. And at the bottom of the card, we show you pieces of information, genealogical information that we were able to find based on information that exists in your family tree and information that exists in your DNA matches family tree. So we'll go over these one by one once in the next couple of slides, but as the card gets higher, it means that we have more information to tell you based on the ancestors added in the family tree. And the top right corner, you see a little gray icon. That's the place where you can add notes. Genetic genealogy is a lot of work in most of the cases. And unfortunately, the epiphany doesn't come the first time we look at the DNA match. It usually requires coming back again and again, and every couple of visits, some new information will be added. We'll be able to make some progress in our research, and therefore every time you make some progress, you can just put a note, you click on that icon, and a little note section will open up, and you can type here anything that you know, anything that you want, and this will be saved for you to be used later, both in the DNA match page and in the review match page, which we'll dive into in a second. So that is also very useful, and I recommend every time there's something you know to add that. One of the challenges, as I see it and what I hear and see from our users, is that they're very overwhelmed when they get the results. So the first time you log in, there's the ethnicity estimate, and then you move on to the DNA matches, and you see a list of thousands of people you've never heard about, you don't know how you're related to them, and you simply don't know how to start. So the list is sorted by those who are closer to you. They appear first, and as the amount of shared DNA gets lower, they appear in the more distant pages, let's call that. So your top DNA match will be at the top, but that's not always very useful, because, for example, if you have someone on page 20 who has 0.7% of shared DNA, and then another person with a little bit less than that, 0.6% in 30 pages from there, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's better. He's more. It makes more sense to look at the closer one in such scenarios. So we're providing you with various ways to filter your list and look at your matches in various ways, which I highly recommend. The first one we'll go over are the filters, which you can see highlighted here. Once you'll click on that, a little bar will open up, which will give you the option to filter your list by various criteria. The one I like the most is the first one, under all tree details. Here you have the option to filter your list by those who have a family tree. It's not mandatory on the website to create your family tree. Unfortunately, not all users do that. We're trying to encourage them to do that, but some don't. So you can start by, okay, I have 5,000 DNA matches, filter my list and show me only the ones who have a tree. The next one is by shared surnames. So we are able to look in your family tree and in theirs and try to look for surnames in common that appear both for your ancestors and for them. So if you'll filter the list, only the ones with whom you have shared surnames will remain in the list. Another option is by smart matches. For those who don't know, smart matches are indications that our algorithms were able to find for people in your tree and in someone else's tree who we believe is the same person, because the name matches and the dates match, etc. So that's one of the best things to use at first. If you filter your list to show only the ones with whom you have a smart match, so these are DNA matches, people who we were able to find some genetic similarity between the two of you, and both in your tree and in theirs, the same person exists in certain probability. You still need to look it up yourself and decide. But that's a really good indication that may explain how you and a DNA match might be related. And some other features, we'll look at them in a second. The next one is by relationship, how closely they are to you. So we've broken it down to 3 categories. You can choose to filter your list to show only the ones who are close family. That's up to first cousin. Extended family goes all the way up to the 3rd cousin, I think, category, if I remember correctly, and distant cousins are 4th or 5th. So obviously, as you go up, more people are in that group, but it's easier to just filter by a specific category and stay with a shorter list to work with, another option to work with it. Where are they from in the world? So these are not ancestral events or names, as I explained before. These are where these people live today in the world. MyHeritage has a great worldwide outreach, and people from all around the world are taking DNA tests with us today, which is great. And it's super exciting when I'm lecturing in the US, for example. So people are so excited to see a DNA match that's from the US or figure out how someone is related to them. But when they see a person from their ancestors' countries, you can just imagine the level of excitement that's involved with that. So if, for example, now I'm trying to look for my DNA matches in Bulgaria, where my grandmother came from, I can filter the list and show me just my DNA matches from Bulgaria. Maybe I'll be able to find some of my matches who live there today, family that didn't immigrate to Israel, I don't know, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. The other option, the last option, is filtering by ethnicity. These are their results, so you can choose to filter and see only when I received my results. For all my life, I knew that I'm 100% Jewish Ashkenazi, but when my results came back, I discovered that I'm about 3% Iberian. When I tested my mom, she came out with about 6%, which makes sense. And I was really curious to know where these Iberian roots come from. So one of the things I tried to understand was to look at my DNA matches and filter to see only the ones with Iberian who match me, and try to understand where from my maternal side this is coming from, and who are these people and what's the connection. So that's also a nice way to look at it. The sorting option, so as I mentioned before, this list by default is sorted by those who are closer to you, but there are many other ways to do that. You can choose to look at the list by the number of shared segments. So you want to look at the people with more shared segments, even if they're smaller. By the size of the largest segment, how long the shared segment with your DNA matches is. By name or by most recent. That the last option is basically to show you people are taking DNA tests all the time and are added to our system. Therefore, you're getting DNA matches all the time. So sorting by most recent will show you the creation date of the match. When was it added to the system? So you can look at your newest one by sorting the list that way. Another option is to search it. We provide you with two options to search, either by a name of your DNA match or by an ancestral surname. So if, for example, now I know that I'm trying to look for clues on my Bloom side of the family. It's a known Jewish Ashkenazi name. I can type in Bloom, and all of my matches who either have Bloom in their names or one of their ancestors have Bloom will show up. That will filter my list so that I can work with that. All right. So that was pretty much a good coverage of the review match page and Homer Simpson. And now we can move on to the review match page and see in more depth some of the information that we are showing you on a person in the card. So when you go to the review match page, there are a lot of components there. There are a lot of different types of information that we're surfacing out. Again, the main goal of doing this is trying to figure out how you and that person are related, who is the common ancestor. So the review match page is exactly there to help you do that. If the match list show you some aggregated data, or in summary, what are the important things we wanted to surface, here you can go in more depth and see the information. So the first thing on the list, and this is a match with my cousin Tomer, is that you'll be able to see the smart matches. As I mentioned, people in your tree and in their tree, and you can decide for yourself whether it makes sense and these are really the same people. So here we can see the first two, but there are more because our trees are very similar. We have a full branch that is similar. And I can see those people and decide for myself. Okay, I know that person. I know how I'm related to him. Really interesting to know if he's really related to him also and from what side, and then figure out the connection. So smart matches is really one of the coolest things and the most valuable things you can have for a DNA match. Next in the list, we'll show you the shared surnames. So as I mentioned before, you can search for them, but you can also filter the list to see only the DNA matches with whom you have a shared surname. So in the case here, we're showing you, and we can see that we have Bloom and Carmen. Assuming I didn't know who Tomer is and how I'm related to him, these names would have rang a bell and told me, okay, the Bloom and the Carmen are both from my maternal side and from a specific side of my maternal side, and that would have been a great hint. But in many cases, there are no shared surnames, and we'll still be showing you the surnames of both you and your other side ancestors side by side. We know we do two things at MyHeritage which are pretty cool. The first one is that even if the names are pronounced a bit differently, we might still consider them as shared surnames and indicate that. So some people write Cohen with a K and some people write it with a C, and we'll still be able to tell you that you both have a Cohen, which is great. And another cool thing that we do is that we're also trying to transliterate, what we call transliteration. This is when I wrote Cohen in Hebrew, for example, and the other person wrote Cohen in English or in Cyrillic, in Russian, we'd still be able to match those and say you both have Cohen. So this is a great algorithm. It works in a couple of languages. Sometimes it doesn't, and that's the reason why it's great to review the surnames, even if we didn't indicate that there's a shared ancestral surname, such as in this example. So I can look and I can see Haidt and I can see Gomilski, which may ring a bell or may not. And maybe I even have them in my tree, but spelled in a way that we couldn't catch it. Okay, so still review and see if something rings a bell. Next in line are the ancestral places. So just today in the corridor, one of the ladies here stopped me and told me, unfortunately, there are no surnames. But when we scrolled down, we saw that there were so many events from Poland, both on her side and on her DNA matches side, and that was a really good indication as to where the connection might come from. So in this example right here, I can see that I have 5 countries around the world where in my tree, my ancestors had events of birth and death. And so did Tomer Again, in this example, I know how Tomer and I are related, but this is a great way to look at it. And it's broken down also by a specific city. So we can see that we both had events in Sofia, Bulgaria. And we have different types of indications to show your events, his events, and when an event took place in an exact specific city. For two events to be called, for you and a DNA match to have a shared ancestral event, the event needs to take place in either a country or for the US, a US state. So if you have an event in some state in Nevada and an event in New York, that won't be considered as a shared place. All right. And here are some events in Russia. In this example right here, I can see that on my side I have, I don't know how good you can see that on the big screen, but here we can see that Tomer has events in Russia and I have events in Russia, but my pin falls right there in the middle of the map in a specific place, and the ancestor, which you can see on the bottom left pole, is not related to me from the same side of the family. So this is why it's also important to look at where the pins fall, where the cities are. We're also presenting it in a map view. What happened a lot in the past is that, especially Jewish Ashkenazi is a great example, because the community was so close and we intermarried within the community. A lot of times people had to travel between villages in distances approximately of 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers. So many times the events won't fall in the same place, but will be very close to one another. So that can be a hint that you might have a shared ancestor coming from that place in the world. Yes? The number, the question was, what does the number mean in the pin? In this pin, it says 4, I believe. It's too small on my big screen. It means that I have 4 events that took place, or 4 ancestors, excuse me, that have events in this place. So it counts the number of ancestors. Next in line are the shared DNA matches. Yes, please. So the comment by the gentleman was that in Spain there is a different method for having surnames. There are 2 types of surnames per person, and you think that we can leverage that in a way that today we're not doing that. I'll be happy to discuss it afterwards because I'm not familiar. Thank you. All right. Shared DNA matches. So these are people who you also you match with, and the person that you're looking at is also matching. So here we can see, when I'm looking at my cousin Tomer, we can see that I can see my mom in the list. I can see my aunt. My microphone is not working. One. Back? Okay. So when looking here, I can see people who I know, but all from my maternal side of the family. Although I've tested a lot of people from my paternal side, none of them appear here. So I can make an assumption that this person I'm looking at, Tomer, is probably related to me on my maternal side and not from my paternal. We show a pedigree chart, which is a quick overview on the pedigree chart of the DNA match. We're also showing you a match of your shared ethnicities, what you have and what the other person has, so that you can compare them for yourself and decide whether something makes sense. In many cases, people have mom and dad coming from different ethnicities. So if I don't know anything on that person and he didn't create a tree, I can see if we're matching on a specific ethnicity, that might be a hint onto how exactly we're related. And lastly, on the page, we show a chromosome browser, which shows you where the shared segments are on the chromosome. That's, again, from a previous topic, from a previous session I ran. And the chromosome browser is basically a tool that lets you put DNA matches, multiple DNA matches together and try to see whether they triangulate, whether they're all matching one another and there's a shared segment that's shared between all of them. So in this example right here, I took, for example, myself, my mom, and my grandma, his mother, and when I tried to compare them, I was able to see that there are a lot of triangulated segments because we have a common ancestor in this case. That's her. So that's another way of working with multiple DNA matches to see if you are all related through the same way. All right. Another addition we added to the product, beginning of this year was auto clusters. It's something we worked on collaboratively with EJ Blom from Genetic Affairs to implement on MyHeritage. What autocluster does is that it takes your list of DNA matches and it tries to break them down into groups which can indicate a common ancestor for that all users in a specific cluster are related to you and one another from a specific family, from a specific branch or a specific ancestor. So the way it works is that we go over the DNA matches and we're trying to look for combinations using shared DNA matches and trying to break them into groups, separate them. And once we do that, we usually end up with different groups. For example, I took matches A through G, and I can see that A, B, C, and D are all matching one another, and myself, of course. And the same thing happens with another group, E, F, and G, who are also matching one another, but not matching the other people in the group. And the automatic algorithm, it runs in the background and create those groups, which eventually lead to groups who we can identify, point, or assign to a specific ancestor of ours, so that all these people in either of these groups is related to me through a different ancestor. The way it works is that the report is generated offline, and pretty much what you see here is that those are the clusters that I got for my run. We just had another session on that in got broken down. Okay. Technical difficulties. Oh. What it does, let's stay on another slide. What it does is that it gets you a nice report and a table that you can work with to separate your matches and see who's related to who and find common ancestors, looking at it like kind of in a group view and not one by one as we did up till now. All right. So that's what we had up until we released Theory of Family Relativity. And Theory of Family Relativity was released around February, and it was accepted really nicely within our user groups and people who have taken a DNA test. And I'll start by explaining what it is and why I think it's so great. But I think all we just spoke about is kind of a good introduction to why we thought Theory of Family Relativity is required. So up till now, all of the features, all of the little tools and capabilities that you were provided with always looked at a DNA match as its own. So someone took a DNA test and he has a tree with 4 people, and that's all you have to work with, right? You have his parents and maybe a grandparent, and that's it. Some people don't have trees at all. Some people have very missing information, and all you can do is work with those features that you had on your review DNA match, looking just at the information that this person has provided. But we wanted to leverage what we have on MyHeritage so that we can build something much bigger than that. And the way I like to explain it is by using a tree. How cliche. Let's assume for a second that this is the tree of humanity. Everyone's connected to everyone. Okay? Ideally, if we had the time, resources, information, we could have built a gigantic tree where we know exactly how everyone is related to everyone. And the problem with DNA matching up till Theory of Family Relativity is that this is my contribution to the big tree of humanity. That little branch. This is what I know. This is my close family. This is all I have. And when we have a smart match, again, a smart match is an individual that exists in my tree and in another person's tree, we get a little bit more. Okay? And now I was able to fill a tree of 50 people up till my great-grandma, for example, and this is where I stopped. I don't know much more. But someone else was able to also add information about my great-grandma that added few more generations up, or to the side, or to the left, to the right or left. And this is exactly what we wanted to do. So all these smart matches and record matches and the technologies that we had in MyHeritage for years that let us provide our users with more discoveries and learn more about their history can be taken down and combined if we take all of the trees and we start grouping them together and start building that big tree, right? The dream that we had of connecting everything that we have into one big thing. Then we'll be able to indicate to you maybe how a DNA match is related, because we're using more than just the data that you provided or the other person provided. We're taking all of the data points we have on MyHeritage, everything, and trying to connect them together. So this is what we did. The problem with working for MyHeritage is that the numbers update every day. So this is accurate for last week. Now it's even higher, as was mentioned earlier today. So we have about 10 billion historical records. We have about 47 million family trees with 3.6 billion profiles. And what we did is that we built a logic, an algorithm, that takes all this information together, puts it in the bowl, and tries to connect everything together based on all the technologies that we have, trying to link these types of information and build one big tree and connect the dots. This is exactly what we try to do. And that allowed us to come up with a theory of family relativity. It leverages the technology that we implemented so that we can point out to people and say how your DNA matches are related to you, even if you didn't provide the information or the other side didn't. We're helping one another, which is super cool. Let's look at this example. This is Roman, and he has a match, Emilia. And up till now, we were only able to tell Roman that Emilia is she's in a family tree. He has the DNA estimate based on the amount of shared DNA, and she appears in a family tree with roughly 400 people managed by a Jim Smith from the US. I'm sure all of you have seen such DNA matches in the past. No surnames, no places. He can look at the ethnicities, he can look at a little bit some other information, try to look at the tree and see if something rings a bell, but that's all he had. And then we introduced the theory of family relativity, and I checked this match again. And when I did, I noticed a new thing. And here it said that Emilia is his second cousin once removed. All right. So now we were able to say, up till now, the estimated relationship was first cousin twice removed to fourth cousin, but now we were able to narrow it down and tell them exactly how they are related, that they are second cousin once removed. And then you can go to the review DNA match to look exactly how's the connection built. Yes? Once removed means one generation down. So his second cousin, her son or daughter. Twice removed, granddaughter. Review DNA match. All right. So now when you'll go to the review DNA match, if you have a match with a theory, you'll see a new component. I'll zoom in into all of these things so that you can see them clearer. In the review match, we'll show you kind of like a basic view, okay? The short path, how you and your DNA match are related, okay? So on the bottom left corner, I hope you can see Roman. And on the bottom right corner, you can see Emilia. That's the DNA match. That's the person we're trying to understand how they are related. And you can see a nice chart that shows how going up from Roman, we go all the way up till we get to Alexander and Margaret, and then go all the way down till we reach Emilia. So this is the theory that we found for them that explains how they are second cousin once removed. Now, obviously, for us genealogists, that wouldn't have been enough, right? Just telling you, hey, this is great, right? So what we've done is that we're giving you an additional view in which you can examine each one of the jumps we did, how we were able to come up with this theory, and I'll show that in a second. So at the top, we're telling you what the theory is that Emilia, again, is his second cousin once removed on his mother's side. And sometimes there'll be more than one theory. Sometimes there'll be second cousin once removed, and they can also be third cousins on his father's side. That's happening a lot with endogamous populations. And it can also happen because data was filled out differently. We're relying on user-based data, which is sometimes, I know, it's surprising, incorrect. All right. So we spoke about Roman and Emilia and the path that it goes through. If you're interested in seeing more information even before diving in and looking exactly on how the theory was built, you can always hover over a person and get a little bit of information, such as what is the relationship to you, to your match, and the birth and death facts that we have on this person, combined from the trees. Once you are ready to go, you get on the click view full theory, and you arrive at the full theory page. This is like the full view that shows you how we were able to come up with this theory. Okay, and we'll go over that one by one and explain what we see. So even from here, there's an option to switch between the different theories, second cousin once removed to third cousin, if there's more than one. But what I'd like to draw your attention to are the paths that are now marked. In many cases, we are able to find more than one way to explain how two DNA matches are related, because we're going through different sources. We're going through different trees or through different records, and therefore we're showing you up to 5 different paths, if we have that, of how we were able to figure out what is the connection. How are you second cousin once removed? So let's start by looking at the theory and see how we got there. So I'm zooming in on the left side of the chart where we start with Roman. This is us. We are logged in as Roman. And we're looking at the theory, how we were able to get to Emilia and say that we're second cousin once removed with Alexander and Margaret as common ancestors. So we can see that we started with Roman's tree. That's his tree on MyHeritage. And on MyHeritage, we went up through Roman to his mother, to his grandfather, and we stopped. Either Roman didn't provide more information, or we decided that this is a good time to jump to a different tree. And what happened here is that we made a jump of a smart match, represented with the circle, to a different site on MyHeritage, a different tree, a collision website managed by Laura from Australia. Up till now, there was no way for Roman to know that there's any. There was a smart match between his grandmother and the person in Laura's tree, but it was never in the context of DNA, and maybe never draw his attention to it. You can see in the tree how big it is. You have an option to view the tree if you want, to verify the information for yourself, but you don't have to really go all the way there. Even from the theory page, if you'll click on the indication for the smart match, the one that made the jump from your tree to someone else's tree, we will open up a pop-up showing information side by side of the information in the person from tree A and tree B, and same for records. I'll show an example of that soon. So you can see here all the information we have on the Kip Solomon, the person that we started the hop to the other tree from, and the name of the parents and the siblings and dates and every information that we can present. So you can judge for yourself whether it makes sense or doesn't that we made that jump. So we stay on the collision website, and now we go up. Before we go up, we have the option to look again by hovering on information on that person, on Kip Solomon here, and the relationship to me and to my match. And now we're going up till we got to Alexander and Margaret, who are our suspected most common recent ancestors. From there, we started going down. We are still in the same site. And then we had to make another jump because the information either was missing in this tree, or we just had better information with higher score or more details in another tree. So we made another jump. And now we are in a Perevalova website managed by someone else from Great Britain. And the same person here, John Collision Jr., which we can judge and look for ourselves and decide whether it makes sense or not, helped us to go through that tree. So we go down again, one level, and again we make a jump. Okay? This is like the 4th tree that we're visiting in this theory, in this path. And now we got to a Smith website. This is really the tree by our DNA match, Emilia. This is the entry. And we can see that we made the jump through Darren, who was her father, and all the way down to Emilia. I'm so sorry. Oh, okay. So what you can see here is exactly that way in which we were able to find the theory. All the places yes?
Why is one match 100%, another match 95%, and another match 98% probability?
Right. So the gentleman was referring to the numbers below the smart matches icons and the record matches. These are internal scores that we're giving our smart and record matches. They are also presented in the system in other places. That's how likely we believe this match is accurate. So there are a lot of things behind the scenes. We take into consideration dates, names, other factors, and accumulate that, and we eventually give every smart and record match a score. So that you can look at that. If you see something in 98% score, it's probably all of the information is similar. Sometimes there'll be one letter for a middle name, and in the other place there will be the full middle name, so that might affect the score in a way. So it's kind of more like a hint to the user, like start with the lower scores. That's a good comment. No, the question was whether the person approved the match. It doesn't affect the score of the match. A lot of people just approve matches because that's what they do, even when they're wrong. So the score is the score that our system believed is that a user cannot affect the score that the smart or record match gets on MyHeritage. When we calculate the theory of family relativity, we are excluding any rejected smart or record match. So if a person intentionally came and said, this is wrong, we won't take it into consideration. If someone accepted information that is inaccurate, this is something that is left for us, the users, to look into and judge for ourselves. I must run with the slides, so I promise I'll leave some time for questions at the end. I just want to show a couple more examples on how we do it and some more cool ways that this comes into life. Here's another example, still with our friend Roman. And here's another match with Julian, I think. I believe so, maybe Jillian. And what happened here is that we went from his website into a family search collection on MyHeritage. So now we're traveling through family search to get to explain a theory of how two people are related. So we took, as I mentioned, the previous theory showed only family trees on MyHeritage, but there are many cases where we take into where the family search collection comes into play, the Gini. So when a collection is used, you can also hover over that and search the specific collection. And here is another very cool example of a theory between a user and between two DNA matches, which goes through the 1940 United States Federal Census record. So we were able, from the census record, to figure out the name of the person and the parents, and from the parents we made a jump probably to another family tree, which I'm not sure without it whether we were able to do that. So that's another cool example. I'll finish with one of the most beautiful theories we have. This is a theory that leverages every possible type of information that you can imagine on MyHeritage. And I'll zoom in because it's very, very, very zoomed out at the moment. In this case, we are starting with a family tree on MyHeritage, and we're making a jump, and we're moving to Gini. And from Gini, we made a jump into a Canadian census. From there, we jumped to family search, back to Gini, and eventually ended up on a family tree on MyHeritage. So this is so cool. When we started working on that and we started looking at real life examples of people and like what will come out of this, I can hardly imagine how someone will ever be able to figure out that connection without this, because it does an automatic there's an automatic mechanism involved that runs on so many pieces of information and takes everything into consideration, including rejected matches, as I mentioned, and accuracy and probabilities, and looking at names and dates, and correlates all together to provide the user with a theory that says, this person may be related to you, and this is how, and this is the exact relationship, and here are the common ancestors. So we were super excited when we started working on that. I must say one thing at this point is that this is a theory. We chose the name for a reason. As I mentioned before, you might be shocked, but a lot of people put wrong information in their trees, either because they don't know, because they take someone else's advice, they put something in, they accept a smart match, a record match, which is inaccurate. Unfortunately, the algorithm, as much as it's smart, it doesn't know to differentiate between those yet. I believe eventually we'll be able to get there as well. But a lot of the information is based on what people put in the system. So that's why we call it a theory of family relativity, because we want to give you a hint, an option. Everything I showed you before were all great hints, surnames and places that all looked at a DNA match on a single level. This is what I know, this is what he knows. Here, because we're also, as great as it sounds, and I love the concept of us as a community of all users on MyHeritage helping one another. Some of these people that we went through here have no idea how helpful they've been to others in finding connection to other people. They haven't even tested for DNA. And it's so great. But it's important to keep in mind that these are people filling in the data and worth viewing again and again. I will end up by saying that to find your theory of family relativity, the DNA matches you have with, again, we're coming back to the beginning. Under the filters on your DNA match page, the first drop down will have has theory of family relativity. Once you'll click on that, you will only be left with the DNA matches for which we were able to find theory. We recently updated the data. We're starting to send emails notifying you on new theories that we found for for your kids. And that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. We have a little bit of time for questions, and whoever wants to talk to me, I'll be sitting at the product table right there for the next 2 days. We'll be happy to answer. Yes, please. Yes.
I have a third cousin who tested on MyHeritage, and I tested on MyHeritage. And we both have trees, and we both have identified correctly the great-great-grandparents we share. Spelling it all exactly correct, yet there's no theory of relativity joining us. How could that be?
Are you appear together in the same tree? Do you both exist in the same? The question was, the gentleman has a relative, a third cousin or a second cousin. I'm sorry, a third cousin, and they both have family trees on MyHeritage, and the ancestor exists in both, and they didn't get the branches look the same, pointing to the common ancestor, and they didn't get a theory of family relativity connects them. My question was whether both of you are in the same tree. If he's in your tree, then we won't provide you with a theory. It feels for us that we're telling you, hey, here's your common ancestor, you've filled it out.
If I listed her in my tree, you wouldn't bother to give me the theory.
Yeah, because you know it. All right. Yes, please. She has no theories, and she wants to get theories. Yes, of course. Everyone. I totally get that. What can you do to have theories? My best thing to say, first of all, is to make sure that you have a tree as rich as you can get it to be. Fill as much information as you can. Make sure that you're associated with a person in that tree. We see, because people sometimes upload their JEDCOMs and things like that, they end up with a tree, but they're not associated to any individual there. There are a lot of support folks here who can help with setting that up. I can help with that as well. If you are not associated with an individual, your member, you look at a tree, but you're not in it, I'm sorry, it will be much more difficult for us to figure out that this person in the tree is actually you and point you the route. So this is also something to do. And other than building trees, and the great thing is that we're constantly adding more records. People constantly keep building their trees. So every time we're doing a refresh, we saw a huge increase in the number of theories that we find, also in the number of users who get a theory. So just provide all the information you can, and stay tuned. Yes, last question, and they are. So the question was, I said that for theories, we are not including in the algorithm all the record matches and smart matches which were rejected. The question was, are we including the ones who are marked ignored? By ignored, I mean that you simply didn't accept them, right? They're pending. And yes, we're definitely taking them into consideration because a lot of people are not into accepting smart matches. And if we would have dropped it, we just looked at examples to decide on that. We thought there were many less theories. And just because someone didn't accept a smart or record match doesn't mean it's wrong. So we decided to keep them in if they're pending. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you.